So my grandma was Gladys O'Brien. She was 100% Irish, like my mother. My father was a full-blooded Italian, so there was never any doubt that all 6 kids in our family would go to Catholic school, which we did for 12 years. But the weird thing was, my father would not go to church on Sunday like the rest of us. And they told us in school, if you didn't go to church on Sunday, it was a mortal sin. And if you didn't go to confession before you died, you would go to hell for eternity. And they were very visual how they showed us in these books how it looked. So I would picture my father floating down a river of fire with his head up and screaming and devils dancing all around him, which is a horrible thing for an 8th grader to think about. Your dad's going to be in hell forever. Well, every few weeks, my mother would wake up on Sunday with a hangover and she would say, Frank, you're taking him to church. Oh, come on, Jerry, Jesus Christ, I don't want to take him. I take him every week. You're taking him. All right, get in the car. So we get in my dad's big Oldsmobile, start driving. About halfway there, he say, you promise you won't tell Mom? We promised, Dad. He'd take a turn and we'd go to a bowling alley or his favorite restaurant. And he'd sit down and he would order a big breakfast just for himself, but he would order extra toast and bacon and deal it out to the rest of us. And we were so happy just to eat that and just knowing we weren't at Mass. Well, by the time I got to about 7th or 8th grade, even my mother had stopped going to church on Sunday. But we're still going to Catholic school. So this whole idea of sacrilege and sin and sacraments and everything started getting very confused in my head. Well, by the time I got to 8th grade, I had this nun named Sister Matthew. And she was without doubt the heavyweight champion. She was the Muhammad Ali of all nuns. First time I looked at her, I was like about 4'10". And she was, it looked to me, 6 feet 2 inches tall. And she had these thick black eyebrows and would dance on her forehead like crows when she talked. And she always spoke as if she was a Shakespearean actress on the Globe stage. And she also had a very pronounced lisp. Well, every once in a while, she would get angry at us and say, you're acting like a bunch of bold stumps. I'm warning you when you're good, duh. I'm very good, duh. But when you're bad, duh, I'm horrid, duh. And she described herself with perfect honesty. Because one time I remember Simon Meisner was fooling around and she snuck up and she just walloped him. And you could see the imprint of her hand on his face for an hour later. Well, we went to church before school every day. And after a while, we always had a follower, and a bunch of us started imitating her limp behind her. And we acted like we were drumming or playing the flute. We called ourselves the Sister Matthew Marching Band. I don't know how she never saw it. Well, this one day, 8th grade, walk in, sit down, bell rings. Sister Matthew is staring out at the snow-covered ledge. All of a sudden, she turns toward us and she looks at us with her one good eye. She had lost this left eye, and she used to tell the story. It was like an ancient myth, saying, stop throwing those snowballs or you're going to get a glass eye like mine. And when she got angry, it seemed like it would gel and come to life and bore right under your skin. Gave us all the creeps, of course. Finally, she spoke. Today, class, I saw something I thought I would never see in a Catholic school. Father Schaefer was teaching last period's religion class, and he asked me for a catechism. So I reached into somebody's desk, and I looked through it to make sure all the pages were there. And class, there were things in this catechism that were sacrilegious, terrible things, vicious thoughts. I was scratching madly inside my desk, trying to find that catechism. I was found wrappers and stuff, and I thought, oh, for God's sakes, she was talking about my catechism. Now, this blue Baltimore catechism was basically an illustrated guidebook on how to be a proper Catholic youth, right? Right? It had all of these pictures and drawings of the Old Testament stories and the sacraments and everything. And when I was bored in class, I kind of looked at this catechism as my own personal comic book. And I would draw things all over, like the Virgin Mary and Mary Magdalene. I had beards and top hats. And I had little stick dogs urinating on the burning bush. And Jonah would be hanging out in the whale, smoking a cigarette and drinking a beer. And I also had Moses and Abraham at the banks of the mighty Red Sea with these enormous penises. And Abraham says, hey, Moses, you want some sausage for lunch? Whap, and hits him in the head with his penis. But never in my worst nightmare did I think Sister Matthew would get a hold of my catechism. The boy who wrote all over his catechism didn't even respect what the Lord did when he raised Lazarus up from the dead. Do you know what he has Lazarus saying just after he's come back to life? That was a nice trick, Jesus. Do you think you can escape from a locked safe for an encore? Her glass eye fixed on me for an instant like a death laser and passed by. And would you believe he would further mock the dead? I want y'all to turn to page 46 of your catechism. Everybody was turning. I faked like I had my book in front of me. Page 46 was a picture of extreme unction, the last rites. This little boy had died. Priest was giving his blessing. Mom and dad and brothers with sisters around. And when I put these thought bubbles over everybody's heads. This is what our artist friend wrote as the thought of these poor people just after their son is brother has died. The priest is saying, now I'm going to be late for my golf game. And the father's saying, well, that's one less college tuition to worry about. And the brother's saying it was his turn to mow the lawn, now I'm going to have to do it. But that's not the worst of it, class. Not the worst at all. He has the mother whose little boy has just died. The mother's saying, the brat is finally dead. And she started sobbing, I swear to God, right in front of the class. We had never seen Sister Matthew this upset before. And my chest felt so tight. It felt like someone had just sucked all of the oxygen out of the room. And Sister Matthew pulled herself together. And the boy who did these shameful things is Jeff DeMark. And the whole room whirled around. They were like a pack of piranhas smelling fresh blood in the water. And I felt like this tiny little rowboat out at sea with two huge freighters coming down at me from opposite directions. The one, the SS Sister Matthew, had a huge cargo of Catholic guilt. But the other, the SS Dr. Frank DeMark, was piled high with blind rage. And I thought, who cares about the Catholic guilt? That doesn't matter. But my dad's rage, that's what I had to avoid at all costs. I didn't do it, sister. I didn't do it. There's a Protestant boy in my neighborhood. His name is Greg Frank, and he's a really good artist. And we were playing one day, and he got a hold of my catechism, and he started writing and drawing. I said, what are you doing, Greg? He told me he beat me up if I told anybody. I swear to God, it was Greg Frank. It wasn't me, sister. It wasn't me. Jeff DeMark, God hears everything. He sees everything, too. If you're lying, it will be worse for you later. Now, did you or did you not write and draw all these horrible things in this catechism? I could see my face reflected in that horrible glass eye. I didn't do it, sister. I didn't do it. You know I've never done anything like that before. You know I wouldn't do that. She raised her hand. I thought she was going to bash me like Simon Meisner, but she just grazed my cheek. I believe you, Jeff DeMark. But I am very disappointed that you didn't throw this catechism away immediately once you saw it was in it. Now I want you to get yourself a new catechism And would you stop hanging around with those miserable Protestant boys? Am I clear? Yes, sister. Yes, sister. Very clear. And she limped away and threw that catechism in the garbage can. And I couldn't believe it. At the edge of the plank, and the governor called off the execution. The freighters passed by, and my little rowboat sailed into a safe harbor. And I was so exhausted from this guilt. But I thought later on, at the end of the day, maybe God does have a sense of humor after all.